Welcome to Romance Happy Hour. See, there's that echo.
I was just going to say,
I think it's
hear
me.
that echo.
I think it's me. We're already having technical difficulties and we just started.
We are.
Welcome to Romance Happy Hour. We're so glad that you're joining us tonight. I'm Dylann Crush, and I'm here with Dawn Luedecke, who's over there. Oh, nope. See, it's backwards.
Yeah.
I look like a dope. It's backwards. She's over there. So we're glad that you're joining us tonight. Dawn, why don't you give us a little update on what you're working on? You're looking very, I don't know, cowgirlish tonight.
Yeah, I wanted to get fancy for my husband, and I'm going to apologize now. I look like I'm a foreign film person right now because my words don't match my video. So
it's getting better. Sarah says she can't hear us.
But she can't. Sarah.
Shoot. Can you guys hear us?
Linda, can you hear us?
There's a lag.
Yeah,
so
definitely some kind of weird. I don't know. There's a storm up my way. So my husband said he's in New York City currently, and he said it snowed today there.
Oh,
yeah.
Weird.
So, but I am currently working on getting my head straight after having a release. But I am working on the dog book, kind of getting my plot together for that. The one for Jess, and then just marketing. I've got 4 kids,
just
and yeah, these kids are keeping me busy. Very, very
Dawn
busy.
is living her best life right now.
Yeah,
in quarantine in Virginia, homeschooling 4 kids. It's awesome.
Yes. I am working out just for the what are they called?
Endorphins?
Yes, endorphins. Okay. I'm working out just for the endorphins.
Excellent. I wish that was motivating me. We are here tonight with Hannah, Carey, and Elana Johnson, and I'm going to go ahead and let both of them introduce themselves. You want to go first, Hannah?
So I'm Hannah Carey, and we're just talking about what we're working on?
Yeah, just maybe introduce yourself, say kind of what you write, and if you're working on anything or have anything that just released or whatever you've got going on.
So I write fantasy romance. I'm like Dawn. I live in Virginia. Fun fact, I live on a horse farm. Most people find that pretty interesting. We've got 3 horses, a bunch of chickens, a dog, a cat. Like, I live in a zoo. Right now, so my debut novel released in January. I've got the second book coming out in June. So right now I am split between working on getting everything ready for that release. And then I'm also working on the 3rd book in the series as well, getting that ready, finished up and ready for editing.
Nice. And I am super jealous of you. I go on your posts all the time and watch you and your little horse posts, because someday I'm just going to go just to help you muck stalls. I mean, I just want to do that again.
Welcome anytime for that. I shared a post today about how that's one thing that's not canceled.
I saw that. I almost posted, I'll come and do it for you. No, I was going to say, like, I even said to my husband, I'm like, listen, if she does have coronavirus, like, I'll go clean her horse stalls for her. I just won't go near the house. Like, I'll just be like, hey, I'll go clean your horse stalls for you.
Thankfully, my husband has been a trooper, and he picked up the slack a lot last month when I was sick. It is still picking up the slack. So
now I know this. I hope you don't mind me asking. You can not answer if you don't want to, but I saw your post about you and your husband now sharing an office, and how it's driving you crazy. So what does he do normally?
So he's a civilian for the Navy.
Oh, okay.
And usually he goes to work. But right now he's working from home, which we're very thankful for. But that has ended up with the way the house is set up. That's ended up with the 2 of us sharing an office, which I'm used to, writing and doing the equine business. So I'm usually home like alone, working from home alone. And yeah, now we're not. And this has been going on since like March. I don't know, like the beginning of March, middle of March, something like that. So we're adjusting to the new normal.
So he's a Navy civilian, and you are a horse ranch owner, a manager, right?
Yeah.
Ranch manager.
Yeah. So we have a small facility. I teach lessons and run the farm and do all that stuff. And then I write. So
nice.
In your spare time.
in my spare time. The nice thing about running the farm is I already am self-employed, so it's actually those two things have actually married kind of really nicely. Because I can set my own schedule more or less. So
nice.
Very nice. And we've got Elana here.
She is muted. Okay, there she's not.
I think she muted herself.
Oh, okay.
My dog was running around with a squeaky toy, so I was like, "Get away from that squeaky toy!" I'm Elana Johnson, and I write Sweet and Clean Romance. So I have, 40 books out under my Elana Johnson name. They all take place on a beach. Some of them are romantic suspense. And then I write inspirational cowboy romance under a pen name, Liz Isaacson. So I write full-time now. I used to teach elementary school, but I retired last year. I write full-time. I live in Utah. My husband's home with me. He teaches school. He's actually quitting to do a PhD in the fall.
Oh, wow.
So he'll be going back to school and doing that full-time. And then I've got a 15-year-old at home with me. And thankfully, she's super responsible. So she gets up before me and does all of her schoolwork and everything. I like to write at night. So I start usually around, I really try to do one chapter before 5 p.m. Let's just say one.
Wow.
And then I usually do the bulk of my writing from 8 on. So I'll write from 8 to midnight or 8 to 1. And then I'll do a puzzle for a while. And I'm usually up pretty late. So she gets up before me and gets all her homework done. Then I've got a son in college who doesn't live with me. So he's up at college and finishing up the semester there. I think he has one more week. And he delivers pizza for Domino's. So he's still out working and doing all that. I work from home, of course. My husband's job has transitioned to home as well. So he doesn't really do a whole lot. He's an instructional coach right now. So his job is to help teachers. Since all the teachers are, teaching remotely, he'll do some Zoom calls a couple times a week, things like that. So
is he going to be going to BYU there, or?
Yeah, he's going to go to BYU. He's going to get a PhD in data and inquiry and measurement.
Nice.
So he's going to go to BYU to finish that up. We live just south of Salt Lake. Yeah. And then I leave the house for 20 to 30 minutes a day to take my 2 dogs to the park.
Yeah.
They're the ones that really distract me the most from everything, the 2 dogs.
So fun fact, Dylan, I did not live in Utah, but I lived on the border of Utah, by Logandale, and I lived in Logandale, but Logan, Utah.
Yep.
And Preston, Idaho. So it was like right on the border. So we went there all the time.
Yeah, I'm from a little tiny town called Newton, which is like 5 miles south of the Idaho border. I grew up in Cache Valley.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. My family still lives there and everything.
Nice. So. And my son's, I guess, former girlfriend, she just moved back to Utah, but he had his first major crush girlfriend, and she was from Utah. He is. Luckily, he's never going to see this, but yeah, she was from Utah, just moved back there. So he was during the Corona epidemic, so he was pretty much destroyed that he couldn't even say goodbye to her. So
that's too bad.
We have this running joke because Dawn is in a military family, and so she has either lived or, spent time pretty much everywhere that we've ever had a guest from. So
except for Michigan, Minnesota,
Wisconsin. Well, see, I've got that covered.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we already have one question for you, Elena. Sarah wants to know what kind of dogs do you have?
Yes.
We got to see the fluffy one a minute ago before we came on live, but
so I've got a big dog and a small dog, and they're both doodles. So this is the small dog, and she is a pooch-on. She's a terrorist. She wants me to rub her face. She's little. She only weighs 9 pounds. So she's part poodle and part Bichon Frise. And then I've got a big dog who's almost 60 pounds, and he's a golden doodle. So he's a golden retriever and a poodle, and he loves to go to the park. He will run until he dies. So nice. I throw the ball, and he goes and gets it and brings it back. I throw the ball, and he goes and gets it and brings it back.
You know, not all dogs do that. We've only had one dog that has ever liked to bring the ball back, and it was a poodle, a standard poodle. Mm-hmm. Every other dog we've ever had, you know, we get the thing that flings the ball. Yeah, the chuck it. Yeah, and they never bring it back.
Oh, we have a hound, and she does not play that game. Yeah. She'll chase it all day long, but she's like, no, I'm not. Just no.
Nope.
Never bringing it back. Our English Mastiff, she'll grab it, she'll get it, and then she'll come back like she's giving it to you, and then she'll be like, just kidding.
Yeah,
she'll go around you.
What my other dogs have done. They just, they like to play that game. They come and chase me, and maybe I'll drop it, and you can throw it again. Game, which is no fun. Yeah. So, well, we are thrilled to have both of you with us tonight, and I think we decided that Elena is going to read first.
Yes.
So, you want to tell us a little bit about what you've got, and are you reading an Elena Johnson book tonight?
I'm going to read an Elena Johnson book tonight, and it just came out today.
Awesome. So, happy book birthday.
Thank you. So I don't have one. I know Dylan said people like to see the cover, but I'm like, I don't have one. Like, I'm lucky if I can get the paperback out before or on the same day as the ebook. So I'm like,
that's okay. You just tell us which one it is, and we'll go look it up.
So it's I write Cowboys Under Liz. They're pretty inspirational. Not pretty. They're inspirational. They've got some Christian light is what I call them. And under Elena, I like to write just straight up non-Christian. It's clean, but it's not Christian. And so I decided, and I like to write romantic suspense, and I like to write things that are just a little bit, maybe kind of off the norm a little bit. So I was talking to my husband one day because he shoots some of my covers, and I was complaining about all the cowboy stock art that's out there.
Or lack thereof.
The lack thereof. And I'm like, I just want a guy who's wearing a shirt, who doesn't have a rope or a pipe or a gun. And he's not like, looking weird or like got a piece of hay in his mouth or whatever, So he's like, well, we should just shoot some. And I was like, okay, we should totally do that. And he goes, we were just talking about some things. And he doesn't really help me with my books. He's never read any of my romances. But he said, what you should do is you should do some prison cowboys. That would be really sick. So I was like, oh yeah, that would be really sick. And then that's what I did. So
oh, that's funny. So he's had a major influence.
Yeah.
On your career, even though he's never read one of your books.
Never read one. So I decided that I was going to write this kind of bad boy cowboy book, but have him be really good, of course, and I kind of delved into researching the prison system a lot, and it was really interesting. And anyway, I'm going to read a little bit from that book. It's called Hopeful Cowboy. It's book 1 in the series. And so there's going to be 5 books in the series. And there's this group of men that have been in this low security prison. So most people that are in a low security prison are like, surgeons who've committed some sort of fraud, and lawyers and investment bankers. And that's this sort of white collar crime, which is really interesting for me to learn about to write the book. And so Nathan is in prison. He's getting out of prison for a release program, a residential release program. And Ginger owns the ranch where she has prisoners come work her ranch for like the last 6 to 8 months of their sentence. So she's picking him up from the prison. That's what I'm going to read for the next few minutes.
Okay. And where is this set? Is it in Utah or?
No, this is in Texas. This is
Texas.
In the coastal bend of Texas, which was a new area of Texas for me. I've written lots of cowboys in Texas under Liz, but I've never gone to the coastal bend. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this Gulf of Mexico, Texas side. It was kind of fun to kind of learn about that, as well as I kind of had to learn what kind of ranch would be over there. So And the reason that he has been nominated for this release program is because his brother has passed away, and his brother left his 4-year-old son to Nathan. So Nathan has sort of become a single father and released from prison after a few years, all at the same time.
All right.
And so that's kind of what's going on at the beginning of the book. This actually takes place in chapter 2, and it's going to move into chapter 3 a little bit. So it's not the very beginning.
We will leave you to it, and we will join you after.
Okay. Saturday morning, Ginger arrived back at River Bay with a small backpack. She'd gotten the requested clothes for Nate, as well as a couple of soft drinks, snacks, and a chocolate bar for both him and Connor. She'd taken prisoners back to Hope Eternal before, and she knew how much they liked chocolate. Apparently, it was very expensive inside prison, and while she knew Nate had worked in investment banking before his time at River Bay, she suspected he didn't have a whole lot of money to be buying chocolate every week. Someone met her in the lobby and took her outside to a nearby building, this one much closer than the one she'd trekked to on Wednesday night. It was early still, with the sun barely lighting the sky. She'd left the ranch last night and made the 3-hour drive to the town of River Bay, where she'd slept in a lumpy bed and gotten up before dawn. She smoothed down her hair, wishing it wasn't quite so bright. Over the years, she'd tried to tame the coppery color with hair dye, but she'd given up and embraced the auburn locks she had. Thankfully, she wasn't walking down the center aisle of a prison with rows of inmates on both sides, leering at her through the bars. In fact, this building felt more like an office building and nothing more. The guard who'd met her took her into a nondescript room where Lawrence waited with Connor. Joy filled Ginger as the little boy spun in one of the chairs around the long oval table. He had hair the color of corn silk, and she wondered where that had come from. Nate had medium to dark brown hair with blue eyes, so maybe there was some blonde-haired, blue-eyed genes in his ancestral line. "You must be Connor," she said, putting a wild smile on her face. Ginger loved children, even if she didn't have any of her own yet. Connor looked at Lawrence, who nodded. He got down out of the chair and came toward her as she approached him. She crouched down several feet away and set the backpack on the ground. "Guess what I brought for you?" The little boy peered at the backpack, but he didn't guess. She unzipped the top of it and reached inside slowly. "Did your daddy ever let you have chocolate?" Ginger pulled the candy out of the bag and showed it to Connor. His face split into a smile and he said, "Yes, ma'am, Daddy brought me chocolate." His tiny, high-pitched voice tugged against her heartstrings, and he came all the way over to her and the pack. "I brought 2 now," she said. "One for you." She handed him one of the chocolate bars, "and one for your Uncle Nate." "Uncle Nate loves chocolate," Connor said. Ginger grinned at him. "I bet he does." She handed the child the second bar. "So you hold it for him, and when he comes out, you can give it to him, okay?" Connor took the second candy bar, but handed the first back. He didn't have to ask for Ginger to know what he wanted. She got to work on ripping open the top of the package, and she gave it back to him. "It's got squares, so you can just break off what you want." "It's the cookie kind." The child looked at her with wonder in his clear, bright blue eyes. "I love these." He broke off the top square and stuck it in his mouth. Ginger wondered where his mother was, but she hadn't asked Lawrence. She straightened to do just that when the door in the back of the room opened. Nate walked inside, wearing his prison uniform and carrying a medium-sized bag. It was clear, and Ginger could see everything he owned right there in his hand. Her heart beat out a song of remorse for him, too, because she had no idea what it was like to have her entire existence reduced to what she could carry in a single see-through bag. "Uncle Nate!" Connor ran toward him, and Nate bent down to scoop the boy into his arms. He pressed his eyes closed as he hugged the little boy, and Ginger actually found herself getting emotional. "Ridiculous," she told herself, bending to pick up the backpack and zip it closed. She shouldered it and then squared her body toward Nate so she'd look tall and imposing. She was tall for a woman, she knew that, but she'd have to gain at least 50 pounds to even start to appear on the cusp of imposing. Nate didn't look her way anyway. He set Connor on his feet and stayed down at the boy's level while they talked. Only when Connor gave him the chocolate and then turned to point at Ginger did Nate lift his eyes to hers. That same magnetic power that had clenched their gazes together a few days ago roared to life. Nate straightened and opened his chocolate, biting off the first square while he simply stared at her. "You have his clothes?" Lawrence asked, approaching her. She blinked and ducked her head, glad for the distraction. "Yes." She handed him the backpack, and he took it over to Nate. 5 minutes, Lawrence said after Nate had the pack and Connor back through the door, and then he's all yours. He turned back to the table and picked up a folder. Here's all the paperwork you need for him, as well as the first month's check. The address for the funeral is in there, as well as all of his family contacts. He looked at the other man who'd come in, and he too wore the uniform of a high-ranking officer at the facility. Anything else? I don't think so, the man said. We'll say our goodbyes out here. When he comes back in, he'll be ready to go. Great. Lawrence collected his bag and walked toward the door Ginger had come through. At the same time, the officer left through the one where Nate had disappeared. She turned in a full circle, one door closing right after the other and sealing her inside the room alone. Alone, to wait for Nate and Connor to come back. Then they'd all leave together. Every time she did this, Ginger felt so surreal. After all, who in their right mind would let her take a prisoner back to the ranch? Didn't they know she had no idea what to do for him, what to say, or how to help him? Her legs urged her to flee. She could drop off the folder at the front desk and say she'd made a mistake. Before she could move, the door opened and Nate walked through it, now wearing the dark suit, the black shiny shoes, and the blue and cranberry tie he'd requested for his brother's funeral. And Ginger couldn't move at all. Chapter 3. Nate held onto Connor's hand as if the small child could protect him from what was about to happen. He'd managed to carry his bag, the backpack Ginger had brought, and his nephew out of the facility. Ginger drove a nice truck, and they'd made good time from River Bay to White Lake, Connor on the bench seat between them. She kept the radio on low, and the tension between them had bled out after only a few minutes. Nate couldn't get enough of the scenery, and he kept trying to see everything as it passed. The flat fields full of crops and waving in the morning light. The water towers fascinated him. And when Ginger had pulled onto the coastal highway, he simply couldn't get enough of the glinting water, the long stretch of tan that was the sand of the beach. The beach and the water, the sky. It was all different outside of River Bay FCI, and Nate breathed in deeply through his nose, no fear of what he might smell. Uncle Nate, Connor said from the seat beside him. Yeah? Nate looked down at the child, his eyes so much like Ward's. Like Nate's, too. Those deep, bright blue eyes came from their father, and Nate could hardly find any of Jane and her son. I have to go to the bathroom. Oh, yeah, sure. Nate looked at Ginger, who'd already started to decelerate. There's a place right up here, she said, easing one of her booted feet onto the brake. She made the turn, and a couple of blocks down, she pulled into a fast food restaurant. Nate sat there because he didn't know if he could take Connor into the restroom alone. His heartbeat pulsed through his whole body, a pit of nervousness way down deep in his gut. He couldn't just walk into this place, though the scent of breakfast hung in the air and tempted him to get a sausage and egg biscuit. Come on, Ginger said, finally opening the door. Get out my side, buddy. We'll meet your uncle inside. She tossed him a look as she slid from the truck and turned back to help Connor out. The door slammed closed and Nate flinched. He pressed his eyes closed and breathed through his nose again. He wasn't wearing the prison blues and orange. No one here would even know who he was, or that he'd been a free man, kind of, for less than 2 hours. He opened the door and got out of the truck, closing the door much softer than Ginger had. She'd taken Connor into the restaurant, and Nate followed, finding them standing in the short hallway that led to the bathrooms. He took Connor's hand and went to the men's room, wondering what Ginger was going to do. Probably just stand watch to make sure he didn't try to run away with his nephew. He was pretty sure he could overpower her without even trying, but he had no desire to run. He had nowhere to go. He'd asked all kinds of questions on Wednesday night, but no one had known any of the answers. Finally, Warden Dickerson had said he'd find out everything he could. What Ward had done with the house, the bills, his money, where his ex-wife was, why his sister couldn't take Connor, all of it. And Nate had been led to a comfortable enough room in the administrative detention. He'd only gone back to Unit NF once to get his belongings. The officers had made everyone leave the dormitory so Nate could have as much time as he needed to clean out his locker without having to answer a bunch of questions. Questions he didn't have the answers to. The warden had learned that Ward had left everything to Nate, absolutely everything, and he'd left him a long letter, too, explaining everything. The warden didn't have it and couldn't get it until that morning when Lawrence the lawyer showed up again. Nate had the letter now, but he needed complete privacy to study it again. He'd only had time to read it once, and he'd been sniffling when his unit manager had knocked and come inside. Greg's last words to Nate still tickled in his ears. Don't be the same man leaving as you were coming in. Nate didn't feel like he was, and he'd taken the card Greg had given him. It was a professional business card, but Greg had put his personal number on the back. Call any time, Nate, day or night. They'd hugged, and Nate had walked out with Connor. Easy as that. Too bad no one told him every step would be like torture. No one had told him the guilt would threaten to drown him as he left River Bay and all the friends he'd made inside. He'd left letters for Ted, Dallas, and Slate, the 3 men he was closest to. Ted had brought another man into their fold, too, not long ago. Luke, not Lucas. That last bit was really important to the guy, and the reason he found himself in a low-security facility with men who'd committed much worse crimes than assault with intent. His crew, his friends, the Mulberry Boys, Greg had called them. His throat closed again, and Nate didn't know how to deal with all these issues streaming through him. He'd thought he'd had problems before, but now he knew how simple prison had made his life. Nate blinked as Connor said, "Uncle Nate, my zipper's stuck." He stepped over to the boy and helped him with his fly before they approached the sink to wash up. He had no idea what to say to Connor. He knew how to get his zipper up, though, and he knew he had enough money to buy the boy breakfast. Everything else, he'd have to learn one thing at a time. Ward had told him to do exactly that. "I know you'll feel inadequate. Heaven knows I do on a daily and sometimes hourly basis. But Nate, just take it one thing at a time, just like you did in River Bay, one day at a time. 1 hour, 1 minute." Nate dried his hands and stepped into the hall to find Ginger hadn't moved. "All good?" she asked, her eyes skating down to Connor. "Yep." "You hungry, Connor?" he asked. The boy looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "A little?" "Can we get a sandwich?" he asked Ginger, because he honestly didn't know the rules at all. "Sure," she said. "We won't want to take long, though. The funeral." He nodded and went around the corner to the line to order. No one looked at him. No one waved a book of tickets in his face and told him to keep his eyes forward or he'd get a citation. No one swore or jostled for a place or breathed threats if he didn't give up his spot in line. These people had no idea how good their lives were. He ordered for all of them and got a bag of biscuits and muffins and hash browns a few minutes later. Back in the truck with everyone, he started handing things out. "Thank you," Ginger said, and Connor echoed her. Nate took a moment before he bit into his bacon and egg biscuit to think back to the last time someone had thanked him. His friends did. Maybe Greg and Ellen had, in time. It felt nice. And that's it.
All right. Great.
So how much research did you have to do for this book?
I did a lot. I watched all these guys on YouTube that used to be in prison, white collar guys who used to be in prison, talking about their time in prison, what it was like in prison, the dormitories. They live in dormitories in low security facilities. So they're not even in cells. They live in dormitories with a group of 16 people. And so they have their bed and their locker. And I joined this guy's newsletter, and he sends out stuff about prison, what it's like when you go before a judge. And I downloaded the handbooks from a couple of the low security prisons in Texas. I just Googled them, and you can go to their website and you can download the handbook. So you kind of know what they wear. I kind of learned about counts. They do counts 5 times a day at certain times, and just, kind of what their life would be like day to day. I read a couple blogs from people who'd been in prison, what they did during the day. I read some stuff about what kind of jobs they have, what they would do in a low security prison, the classes they would teach, and things like that. So it was really interesting. I actually really liked it. I liked learning all about it. It's because I've never been to prison, so
well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, confession time.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm gonna see if I can learn a bunch of this stuff. So it was really interesting. And then the rest of the book, he goes to the funeral, and the rest of the book is they're on the ranch. So it's very much a ranch cowboy fall in love book, and it's got some suspense in it, and whatever, that he's got some old things from the past that he has to tie up that create some danger around what he's doing. So it's kind of minor, the suspense plot, but I really enjoyed writing it and learning about that, whole other world that I didn't know much about. And it was really interesting.
Well, Karen wants to know, how many hours do you write each day when you're working on a book?
For me, I typically like to write, I know it's going to sound insane. It's okay. I write 10 to 12,000 words a day. So for me, that's 4 to 5 chapters, and I can write a chapter an hour. So I really like to have 4 or 5 hours a day that I can write. So.
And how many words is your chapter?
They're between 2,000 and 3,000 words.
Okay. And what about you, Hannah?
So prior to my concussion, I was usually about 5,000 words a day or so. Now I'm averaging somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 a day, and just like slowly working my way back up to that 5,000 mark. My chapters really vary. I'd say they're probably in the at least 1,000 to like 3,000 range. I mean, sometimes because I'm writing primarily fantasy, sometimes they get a little long. They might be more like 4,000 or 5,000 or something like that, but I try and keep them from being too monstrous.
And what is has been the most successful way to market your books?
I'm a baby to marketing because I just debuted in January. So yeah, I'm still on the learning curve of that myself personally.
I run a lot of ads. I run Facebook and Amazon ads. I run BookBub ads. I try to build my newsletter. My newsletter usually does a pretty good job for me. If I can get people who read one of my books and join my newsletter, I have a reader group on Facebook that I really like interacting with. So I try to get in there and post several times a week and talk to them and ask them things and learn who they are and what they like so that I can deliver a book for them that pushes all the right buttons and that they like. So I try to do those things. For existing readers, I try to get new readers with ads. And and then what I do for super fans is I run sales and do giveaways in that reader group or through my newsletter. So I try to think of it as 3 tiers. So I've got new people coming in with advertising, newsletter swaps might bring in new people. I've got existing fans that I interact with through reader groups and through my newsletter, and then I do super fan giveaways where I've got people who are in there all the time who answer every question, that kind of stuff. So I try to cater to all 3 of those people.
Yeah, awesome. Elana is phenomenal when it comes to marketing. She's actually got don't even try to wave me off there. She has some nonfiction books for writers. She runs an indie inspiration group for indie authors, and you were supposed to, you're speaking. I don't know which ones of your appearances have been canceled now because, there are very few conferences that are, I don't know what's happening anymore, but I know that you have spoken at several different conferences and are actually scheduled to speak at several conferences.
Yeah, they all got canceled. So
okay.
I had one in April that got canceled. I had 2 in May. They both got canceled. I was speaking at InkersCon in June. It got canceled.
Well, they're still doing that one digitally, right?
Yes, they're doing that one digitally. So I will be recording that next week. So we'll record that next week and they'll show it in June. I have one in August that I'm doing, the Indie Book Fest, that they have not canceled yet.
Okay.
So
fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We don't really know about August quite yet. No. So, and then I had one in October that they told me they're likely going to move it until later. And then hopefully I'll be in Las Vegas for 20 books in November if there's not like another spike and a big thing where we can't go. So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I was supposed to have been to several conferences already, and they've all been moved. And our viewers know that I was in London. So Elana was in London with me. We were both traveling, although you spent more time on the front end and I spent more time on the back end. So you got home before things got too dicey.
I did. We flew home
barely.
Tuesday. We flew home Tuesday.
Yep.
And then everything happened Wednesday. So we were already home, which was nice. But.
So do you find or do you feel like your success is more or because of your writing?
I lost you. You cut out.
Did I?
Yeah.
Did you say more because of marketing or more because
do you feel like
writing?
It's more your writing or your marketing that kind of pushes you forward a little bit more?
I think
kind of a combination of both.
I think it's always the writing.
Yeah.
So I can market all day long. I can put a ton of money at ads. I can get people to click on the ads. I can get them to download the book. If it's not good, that's where it stops.
Right.
Mhm.
So if you want to really build that, then you have to deliver a good book too. So that then they go, oh, I want to read the next one. And hey, I really like this, she's kind of crazy or whatever, but I'll join her newsletter or whatever. So for me, I think it always comes back to the craft of writing and delivering an amazing book that people can't put down, that makes them think about it after they finish and makes them want to read another thing that you specifically have written. So I can get people there all day long. If I want to keep them, which I do, then I have to deliver a really good book. So
Yeah.
it comes down
Well,
to writing.
adding to that, Sarah wants to know if you can drop the link to your indie group.
Do I know how to do that? Can I comment on this?
You can.
We can
Otherwise,
do it later too.
Yeah, we can just tell her, or I can put a link up later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you search for indie inspiration with Elana Johnson, you'll find it.
Sarah is an author also, so
Yes.
she likes to, I guess, take advantage of all those resources we mention on the show. So
Right.
And on a personal note, how long have you been stuck at home?
Well, I work from home and I really like being home. So I don't feel stuck. And I only have one kid with me and she's old. So I feel like I've got it really good. So I don't want to complain about it. But my school has been canceled since March 12th. And I was texting my work wife the other day and I said, you know what? This thing stole 2.5 months from me because everybody leaves and goes away and does their thing and I'm home and I get to do my thing.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, everyone's home and I still do my thing. I just tell them, look, I got to get this done. I get you're not doing anything, but I got stuff to do. So
No, I totally agree. I write when my kids go to school, like that's my writing time. I get up at 5, I write a little bit. I get them to school, I write a little bit more. Then I work out and it all works out.
yeah.
And now it's like school, maybe work out, trying to squeeze some other stuff in later.
Yep.
Then mommy needs wine because she's about to punch everybody in the face. And so that's my day.
That about sums it up. I agree.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with that because I also work from home, but now my husband's working from home too. So now we're both working from home. So that's interesting. And I do the same thing sometimes. I'm like, honey, I know it may not seem like it, but I'm working right now.
Mm-hmm. And can I just say though that Hannah and her husband are so freaking cute together, and he comes with her. He's so supportive of her. He'll come with her to our chapter meetings sometimes, and he goes to book signings. They're just so cute. I think I got a picture of you guys somewhere, like from the last book signing.
He is very, very supportive. He is.
Yeah. And Karen would like to know how long you've all been married.
I got to do some math.
We've been married going on 7 years this year.
Ah.
But we've known each other since I was 4 and you were what, 7? Yeah, he was 7.
Oh, he's right there.
He's sitting there right there. Oh, see. Oh, okay, Hannah. So the next time you're on, our readers love this. Would your husband read with you? Is he that gutsy? That
he might. He just said that he would.
Oh, wonderful.
So you're upping the ante there, Dawn, for your husband, because for the past 2 years he has said that he would come on and read something, and he has not.
I know. Well,
yet, so
but he's gone half the time.
Competition.
Yeah, I'm gonna defend my husband and say half the time he is out to sea, so he can't at that moment. But
so, how long have you been married, Dawn? We haven't talked about this before.
Babe, how long have we been married? I know he's on here. I think 17 years, 17 or 18. I have to ask him how old we are. He just had a birthday, and I'm like, babe, how old are you now? Because that's how old I'm turning in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, we're going on 20 this year.
Wow.
So we got married in 2000 only because it would be easy to keep track. So
Are you gonna? Yeah, that would be easy. Are you gonna have like this big 20-year celebration, like a
yeah,
of the
we
vows and
might
stuff?
like order curbside to go from somewhere and kick all the kids upstairs and watch a grown-up movie on Netflix or something. So, go crazy.
Yeah, my husband said over 17 years, so yeah.
Oh, well, there
So I
you
was
go.
right. I was right.
I've been married for 23 years.
She's got us all beat.
Winner.
I won't even say what I'm thinking right now. I was going to say some days it feels like a lot longer than 20 years, and some days it feels brand new. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
funny. So we ought to give Hannah a chance to read because I don't want to run out of time before we get to hear from her.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and do that. And Hannah, do you want to kind of set up what you're reading? Do you have the book so you can?
I do. I
cover?
have. Look, I'm gonna try and do this, guys. This isn't
Oh,
okay.
yeah,
I have the paperback. Yeah, I have the paperback. So this is my debut. It's a fantasy romance, and it's definitely a slow burn romance, and it's a bit of a enemies to lovers. So the background, I'm going to be reading from like the middle of the book, and kind of background of the story is basically the story takes place in the middle of a war. You've got one country called Kelnor, which you can kind of think of as like a very patriarchal Roman Empire kind of country. And then you've got another country that's actually an island called Fern Cohen that is more of a Celtic inspired country. And then we have our heroine, who are, one's from one country. Our heroine is from the more Roman country, and our hero is from the more Celtic country. And they sort of get thrown together in the middle of the war. So.
All right. We will leave you to it, and we'll see you back here after.
Okay. All right, so I'm reading from, so like I said, this is sort of like the middle of the book. This is chapter 16 to kind of catch everybody up prior to this point. So Rhiannon, who is our heroine, she's been betrayed by her uncle, who is the emperor. She has escaped certain death with the help of her lover, Nikos. And she finds herself on the island of Broncoin, and she finds herself in the hands of the notorious outlaw that the islanders call the Hunter, aka Connor. And at this point in the book, Connor and Rhiannon are sort of having to kind of put aside their prejudices towards one another. And Rhiannon, in particular, her beliefs about the war in particular are being challenged. So this is chapter 16, The Wolf and the Maiden. The steady rain continued to pound on the windows, and Connor tossed aside his book in frustration. It landed at the foot of the bed, causing Sari to look up from the deer antler she held between her paws. Di paced the room, the black wolf as eager to get outside as Connor. The cold rain had left them holed up in the lodge for days, and he suspected the dismal weather was beginning to wear on all of the lodge's inhabitants. Connor gave the book one last wistful stare, but it hadn't even remotely succeeded in holding his attention over the past half hour. With a sigh, he got up from the bed. Di trotted to him, eager to leave the room, while Sari remained where she was. Connor left the white wolf gnawing on her antler while he and Di stepped out into the hallway. Di took off in the direction of the great hall, while Connor followed along at a slower pace. The kitchen door was open, and Connor caught a glimpse of Max and Finn and Bryn inside preparing for the evening meal. Before Connor could settle down on the bench, Aaron strode into the room. The younger man was soaked, shedding his wet cloak as he approached the fire. Leaf's bringing the horses in out of the rain and asked if you would give him a hand. A couple of them were shivering, Aaron said. I've got to go check on a leak in Finn's room. Connor nodded, getting to his feet. He grabbed his cloak off the wall, pulling the hood over his head to ward off the hard rain as he stepped out of the lodge's back doors. The clearing had turned to mud, and he grimaced at the sight of flooding in one of the pastures. The front doors to the stable were cracked open, and Connor slipped inside. Leaf was latching the door to Lacerda and turned as Connor approached. How many are left? Connor asked. Just Snatcha and Tappa, Leaf answered. Rhiannon's got them. Connor frowned. Both of them? Yes, she's the one who noticed the horses were shivering in the first place. Leaf grabbed a rag off Lasser's door and moved to the next stall. Since their return from Gleanne, Connor had made every effort to avoid any encounters with Rhiannon, but Leaf's words sent him striding down the aisle. What in the blazes was Leaf thinking, he grumbled. True, Snatcha and Tappa got along well, but Connor hardly saw Rhiannon capable of bringing in 2 horses at once from the pouring rain and driving wind. The doors at the opposite end of the stable were open, and Connor stepped through them, his stomach turning at what he would find. Rhiannon was walking toward the building with a mare on either side of her, and to his complete surprise, both horses were walking calmly along with her. Tappa's neck was arched, and the light bay mare jigged slightly, but a tug on the lead line from Rhiannon checked the mare and made her keep pace with Snatcha. Shaking his head in disbelief, Connor continued on through the mud and puddles, reaching for Tappa's lead. I can take her. Rhiannon passed it to him. Thanks. The two led the mares into the stable together and then separated to take the horses to their stalls. Leaf came in to dry off Tappa, and Connor slipped out of the mare's stall, walking down to Snatcha. Rhiannon talked quietly to the gray mare as she worked the cloth over the mare's wet coat in small circles. Snatcha eagerly ate the hay in the corner of her stall. The mare shivered, slowly ceasing as Rhiannon dried her off. Connor leaned on the stall door. Leaf says you're the one who noticed them shivering. She started some as she angled herself to face him. I remember the cold rain was one of the things that my uncle's horses had trouble adjusting to when he brought them north. It was something someone unfamiliar with horses wouldn't think to check for or notice. Connor watched her as she continued to dry off the mare. Rhiannon had surprised him at almost every turn. He had expected a spoiled noblewoman from some far-off land, not the woman who had become so willing to pitch in at every opportunity and fit in with those Connor viewed as family. She was as drenched as Erin had been, but she seemed more sure of herself, more confident than he remembered seeing her before. Connor cleared his throat. You seem to know a fair bit about horses. I always loved them, she said with a soft smile. My mother never minded the amount of time I spent at the stables. My uncle tried to put a stop to it, but I found a way around it. The horses were always there, even when things were difficult. Connor could not take his eyes off her as she stroked Snatch's neck. It was a sentiment he shared, and how he had often felt about the wolves as well. My uncle always thought I was too soft with his mounts and showed them too much kindness, Rhiannon continued. I always thought he said it simply because he was so cruel. The horses were just another thing to use as he deemed fit. She suddenly stopped, a light flush tinging her cheeks as she glanced over at him. I'm sorry, you didn't ask to hear all of that. Connor stepped into the stall. I never said I minded listening. He walked over to the other side of Snatcha as Rhiannon moved to work her cloth along the mare's back, focusing on the horse's clumped wet hair. There's nothing wrong with showing kindness, Connor said. In Kelnor, to show kindness was to show weakness. Even Nikos would say Her movements slowed and her expression became more pained as she trailed off, fiddling with Snatcha's mane. Connor's throat constricted at the look on her face. He had wanted to think well of the man who had saved her life, had wanted to think he was different than the other men from Kelnor he had met, but the way she spoke gave him doubts. Connor reached over the mare's neck and covered her icy hand with his. Nikos would say you were what? He asked. Her smile was forced, that I cared too much. Connor kept a hold of her hand, rubbing his thumb over the back of her palm. Better to care too much than not at all. I think at some point after Mother died, I just stopped caring and accepted things for the way they were. It seemed easier that way, easier than fighting my uncle until he betrothed me to Drakon against my will. But even then, it didn't really matter. I was a possession for him to use as he wished, and his decision was made. Rhiannon, Connor said, waiting until she met his gaze. You have a right to expect to be treated well. She studied him for a moment, gently biting her lip. I think, in a way, I'm glad that I ended up here. Connor squeezed her hand. I'm glad you ended up here. This time her smile was genuine. Connor found he could momentarily think of nothing else, marveling at her resilience in the face of all she had experienced. He reluctantly released her hand, noticing Snatcha was considerably drier and had stopped her shaking. Let's get you inside where it's dry, Connor said. It's freezing out here. Rhiannon nodded, giving the mare one last scratch before she followed him out of the stall. Leaf had gone in from the looks of it, and Rhiannon shivered as they stepped back out into the wind and rain. Connor slipped an arm around her shoulders as they hurried to the back steps. He opened the door for her, ushering her in ahead of him. It will probably be warmer in the great hall, Connor told her as he shut his wet cloak. The fire was going strongly before I came out. I'm going to get changed first, she replied, but I'll see you in there. Connor hesitated, but found he couldn't say no to her hopeful gaze. Yes, probably Sari and Di as well. The smile on her face remained as she walked off in the direction of her room. The chill in the air reminded Connor of his own wet clothing. He wasn't certain if it was the damp cold or their conversation in the stable, but he found himself too tired to fight the urge to avoid her again, at least for tonight. The scream from Rhiannon's lips turned to a whimper as her eyes flew open. She stared into the dark room for a moment before she squeezed her eyes shut. She had seen him again, the boy who had been killed. No, she corrected herself, the boy who was murdered by men like Nikos and Alekos. The images all haunted her, the boy, the old woman, the gaunt faces of the villagers, the soldiers who had tried to kill her, and Connor, a man who was vastly different from any man she had met in Kelnor. She tossed and turned in her bed to no avail. Sleep would not come. Rhiannon slipped on a pair of pants under her long shirt and left her room. She roamed the dark hallway before she finally wandered to the great hall. The fire blazing in its middle surprised her, and a rhythmic clack was the first noise that caught her attention. Rhiannon froze as she listened to Connor's voice, which drifted from the bench by the fire. His back was to her and her presence seemingly unnoticed. She wanted to rush back to her room, but the strange language in which he quietly sang transfixed her. His melodic voice continued along with the soft clicks as he hunched over in front of the fire. Rhiannon felt as if she had intruded on some private moment, and her bare feet slipped across the stone floor as she backed away. Before she could turn, Di's head popped over the back of the bench, the wolf's glowing golden eyes fixed on her. Connor stopped and abruptly turned in his seat. What are you doing up? Rhiannon thought she caught a tinge of embarrassment on his face, though it was hard to be certain in the dim light. I couldn't sleep, she replied. What were you singing? Nothing, he said before turning back to the fire as the clicking resumed. Her curiosity compelled her to approach him in spite of the tightness she felt in her stomach. It was a foreign tongue. He did not respond as she took a seat next to him. A piece of hide laid across his thigh, and he held tools made of antler. A piece of stone rested on the hide, and he used the tools to chip in an oblong-shaped rock. On the bench next to him, a small pile of arrowheads sat beside an almost empty mug of ale. A foreign tongue I have never heard before, she said, staring at his hands as he continued to work. Old Pernish, he quietly said. The tongue of your people? Yes. Who taught it to you? My mother. The sorrow in his voice was unmistakable. How many has he lost? Rhiannon wondered as she studied the sudden droop in his shoulders and the distant look in his eyes. Pain, it seemed, hid behind his stoic facade. What was it about? She asked. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. I thought I heard your people did not believe in children's tales. My mother's people do not, but somehow I don't think my father's people hold so strongly to such things. A story of Aria Blythe, Connor said, taking another sip of his ale. She was gifted a powerful longbow by the wolf spirit. She, a woman? Yes, the bow was crafted by the spirit and held the power of life and death. She used it to save her people and the man she loved. A woman would be deemed worthy and deserving of such honor and power, Rhiannon asked, tilting her head to the side as she stared at him in bewilderment. Connor's eyes locked with hers. As deserving as any man. Rhiannon caught her breath at his penetrating gaze. Never before had a man looked at her with such intensity. That's it.
You're going to leave us there, huh? That was really nice. Yeah, I love the descriptive language. I felt like I could see it right there. So
there's more to that scene, but I stopped it right there.
Tease. All right. So Rachel wants to know, Hannah, where did you come up with the names that you used in your book?
So the names for the people from the Kelnorian country are except for Rhiannon because she's a little bit of both. You find out in the book, but the names for the Kelnorian people from that country are all Roman or Greek. And then the names for the people in the Celtic country, the horses' names and everything, the clan names, those are all either Irish or Welsh.
And did you do a lot of research, like especially for, I want to say horses' names, and because those are different than human names. So how did you do research for that?
I did. So for the animal names, like the names of the horses and the wolves, I tried to, some of them were actually like people names, like Di. Some of them, Snatcha is snow in Irish Gaelic. So I kind of did a mixture of both. I tried to pick, either like a word that would maybe sort of be a name that had meaning, or I would pick like an actual name. And yeah, I did. I read a lot of mythology, both Roman and Greek mythology. I read a lot of Celtic mythology, a lot of Irish mythology in particular, and then kind of built my world like from that, basically.
And I see your plot board behind you there. Is that your plot board?
I do. No, this is actually my like projects that I have started or had. This is like my release board. There's like 10 books up there.
So
that's my goal board.
How many books are in the series? You said there are 3 that are planned in this one?
So the book, my debut novel, and then the novel that's coming out in June. So the way that I put it, they're all under the Tales of Perncohen because they all take place in the same universe. Some of them go together in like sets of 2, and then some of them are standalones, but they all kind of take place in the same world, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I have like 10, I think it's like 10 books or something like that up there right now, maybe more, that all take place in kind of the same universe, so to speak. But yeah, some of them go together in sets of 2, like the one that's out now and the one that's coming out, and that you would want to read those together. And then some of them, the third one will be more of a standalone. You wouldn't necessarily have to read the first 2 books to read it. But if you did read the first 2 books, you would get a little bit more of a fuller picture.
So how do you keep all your details? That is something, I mean, I write contemporary. I have a hard enough time keeping track of the fictional towns and things that I make up. So the idea of, building a complete world from scratch is, somewhat overwhelming. Did you grow up reading fantasy, or what's your secret to keeping all of that straight and all the world building you have to do?
I did. I grew up reading fantasy. I loved Lord of the Rings. I loved Star Wars, kind of like the base. But I mean, I read other fantasy as well, and I still read lots of fantasy. A lot of it, I read a lot of mythology. I studied a lot of mythology and literature in college, so a lot of that I've drawn from that. I have like a series Bible that I have printed up that I am not always the best about adding to, but I have to kind of keep on myself about that. It kind of has, my husband jokes me about it because it's got like family trees, and I've got a list of all the places and the names and the animals and the people. I do have an actual mythology for each of the different cultures. I have that written up at the beginning of each of the books. There's actually a creation story for the island people that I wrote. A lot of it is just, like I said, it's that series Bible and just keeping track, like as I'm writing, just trying to keep track of the mythology and things like that. The book I'm working on right now, I'm actually having to delve into more of some of that stuff. And I was actually today, like as I was writing, I was jotting down notes of like, I'm going to need to put this in the series Bible so that I remember that I said this thing about this thing over here. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun. It's a kind of lot to keep track of. I drew, and they look terrible because I'm not an artist. I have maps that I drew when I started writing the books, but I did actually pay to have actual maps done before I published the first book. And those are actually really, really helpful. I have them on my computer. Because sometimes I can't even remember like just all the places and the towns, and I just have to like pull up my map and I'm like, right, this place is next to this place.
That's awesome.
These people border these people.
Now, let me ask you, because you were talking about authors that or books that you've read and stuff. Have you ever read the Green Writer series by Kristen Brattain?
I have not.
Oh, you should definitely read the Green Writer series. And Sarah would like to know if you're a plotter or pantser, and I guess this would go for both of you. Plotter or pantser or plantser? I'm adding that one because that's me.
I am like I am a major plotter, so actually not on this wall. On my other wall is actually just a gazillion sticky notes of the book that I'm working on right now, where I've plotted out the whole thing on sticky notes. And as I get a scene done, it's kind of like, I also feel like it's like my motivator. Like as I get a scene done, I remove a sticky note, like working my way down them. I feel like a lot of that is because I read the fantasy books, and I sometimes feel like I have to be a little bit more of a plotter because I have to kind of know a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I'm a pretty hardcore, I'm a very type A personality. I have to have it all out there planned out before I get going.
Nice.
I also plot. I do quite a bit of plotting. Set up. I use a romance beat sheet. That's what I use.
Mhm.
So I set all that up, and I do all my character work and all my family work and all my world work and all of that before I really start. But I just have those beats. I don't outline by scene or by chapter. I just know that on this page, at this word count, I want to be here. And
Yeah.
how I get there is the drive.
Yeah, that's what I do too.
Yeah.
Beat sheet.
So that's what I really like.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I am more of a plantser or pantser or whatever variation of the combo you want to use. But I found, I mean, the more that I write, the more I try to plot ahead because it just saves so much more time on, on the back end for me. But I think that's what's fun too, is, kind of that discovery. You kind of discover as you're writing.
Yes.
Some authors I know will do like 30,000 word outlines. And, to me, that just seems like you've already written
30,000 words.
Yeah. You're third of the way done,
I was saying that's intense even for my standards for an outline.
So, I mean, I think I don't think there's any one right way to do anything. I think it all depends on kind of your personality and what works for you and your process.
And that's why sometimes when non-writers come to me and they're like, well, you should really look at so-and-so. I heard an author interview with him and he said he writes this way. You should write that way. And I think, no, thank you so much for the advice. So that's not going to work for me. Yeah. Like everybody is so different. I love hearing how people like their drive, like how they do it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, it's interesting to see how everybody does things different. So if anyone has any questions, we have done it again. We have pushed right up against our hour time.
Yeah.
If you have any other questions for Hannah or Elana, please let us know. Dawn, did you look up the giveaway, or we've got the giveaway post up? Giveaway will be open through Sunday night if you are watching this later. So
yeah. Sorry, I did not.
Okay, if you didn't. I didn't look at it beforehand either. I can't remember exactly what we said that you had to do to enter. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Dawn.
I'm getting it. It's getting there. I'm going past Tanya's wonderful book.
What's next? Elana, you had book 1 come out today.
Yeah.
So, and you said there are 4 more in that series. When do your next books hit?
Yeah, so I'm doing every other month.
Okay.
So not till June. And then whatever the months are after that, August, October, and December. So I'm just doing every other month with Elana because Liz releases every month. So
oh my goodness,
I got to have some time to write all the books and stuff. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, can I ask you one question? I know you probably answered this, but again, I've been drinking wine. But how many hours a day do you work? Because you said you write 10 to 20,000 words a day. 10 to 15?
I write 10 to 12,000 words a day.
10 to 12.
Yeah. So that takes me 4 or 5 hours, and then I try to do a couple of hours of marketing every day. So I really don't start working until like 2 or 3 in the afternoon.
Okay, can I ask you, how many words per minute do you write?
I don't know.
Because that's amazing.
I feel like she has a speedometer next to her. She's typing. Dawn.
Well, if she grew up when I grew up, which I'm thinking you did, you seem to be around my age. You had to do those speed tests in high
That's
school.
true.
Oh yeah. Well, and I taught typing. That's what I did.
Oh, okay.
When I was in the classroom, I taught in the computer lab.
Yeah.
So I taught in the computer lab for 12 years, and then I taught third grade for a few years. Before that, I taught for 20 years. But I taught typing, and I taught touch typing. So I taught the kids how to type from memory, basically, so
Okay.
you don't have to look.
Yeah.
So I'm really fast. I mean, I'm fast. I can type like 120 or 130 words a minute.
Wow.
Now, that doesn't mean I do, because
Yeah.
I mean, if we could just type nonstop, then everybody would be able to write a book.
But that's amazing. Like 4 or 5 hours, I'm averaging maybe 5,000, not 10,000. You're literally doubling me. And I know I type 70 when I'm on a roll. So you must really get on some rolls.
Yeah, and I when I end the night, I outline. I type up, this is what's happening in the next 3 or 4 chapters. So then when I sit down, I already know where I'm going, and I just go. So I typically write in a 2-hour block, and my goal is 2 chapters, 2 hours. And I mentioned my work wife. I text her and I say, 2 hours, 2 chapters, here I go. And then when I'm done, I text her and I'm like, I'm done. So sometimes it takes me 2 hours, sometimes it takes me 2.5 or 3. So it just depends.
Can I just say though that you are just amazing. There have been 2 authors that I have just been like, holy crap, and you're now one of them. The other one was, what is her name? I can't ever remember her name. Everybody tells me her name every time, but she can type 20,000 words in a day.
No, I can't do that.
And I'm just like, what? That's like a whole book.
Like a whole book. I can't do that. And then if I don't work out that day, so when I work out, I do a ton of wrist exercises and finger exercises and stuff. And I try to work out 4 or 5 days a week. If I don't work out, I wear the braces that day. So I've got wrist braces and compression gloves. I wear them often, probably 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you got to protect that. I've tried dictating, and that has not worked for me. No. So it's like, got to make sure you protect those wrists.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, both of you ladies are amazing. I'm so glad you came to join us.
Thank you very much. Did you look that up, or?
Oh, I did, and then my phone stopped. So, now I gotta get back on. All right, so Hannah. Oh, for Pete's sakes!
Did it die again?
No, but like it went off, and so it like went off the post. Hannah, you were giving away a copy of your book and to follow you on Facebook, correct? I believe. And then Elana, you were giving away 3 readers their choice. And
I think it was BookBub.
Yep, I think it was.
Okay, BookBub. Okay. BookBub, everybody. Or you can go to the post.
It's in the group. Yep. It's near the top of the posts at the group. So yeah, make sure you check that out. There are goodies up for grabs, and we will pick random winners for that on Sunday or after Sunday. So you have through Sunday night to enter. So
yeah.
Well, thank you for joining in with us. We appreciate your time, and it was so much fun to hear from both your books. And we will be back 2 weeks. Well, we will be back. It's not 2 weeks. It's actually later, because we're here on May 14th is our next one.
Wow. Hey.
I know there's a little bit of time, because when the first, I think, is that Friday. So yeah, so we've got a little extra time. But we'll be back here on May 14th, and we hope to see you then. So good night, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.